Okay, guys, so today we're going to go over how to properly organize an evidence-based claim so that you can make your own and how it should be properly structured. And yeah. Okay, so the first part of actually making an evidence-based claim is to come up with the claim itself. And the easiest way to do that is through asking these questions. What do I mean when I state this claim? What am I trying to communicate? So what's the main purpose of this claim, and what am I trying to get the reader to understand? How did I arrive at this claim? Can I tell the story of how I moved as a reader from the literal details of the text to a supported claim about the text? So that's how your understanding of the text resulted in this claim coming about. Next, we move on to, can I point to the specific words or sentences in the text from which the claim arises? So this is finding your actual quotations. And so this should be one of the points that you should go over first, since it helps you to kind of figure out what you're going to cite. The next question is, what do I need to explain so that an audience can understand what I mean and where my claim come from? So this is basically just saying, how am I going to explain it to the audience? And then the next question is, what evidence/quotations might I use to illustrate my claim, and in what order? So that's kind of figuring out what quotations you want to use, and then how are you going to present them. Okay, so here we just have a model showing how you would properly organize an evidence-based claim. So you'd start off with an overarching claim of either a couple of books or just one individual book, which you would then proceed to divvy up into three varying points. And then within each of those points, you would try to justify it via presenting evidence that you've already seen in the text. So that would just simply be quotations, and then you would reference it at the bottom with the lines that it's been in. I find this model very useful because it kind of easily shows a way to divide up your evidence and kind of helps you guide the process of coming up with a claim too. So here we have a filled in version of that previous model for organizing an evidence-based claim. And I'm just going to run through it with you real quick. So the claim in this one is that these three varying authors each draws heavily for their argument using different rhetorical strategies. And so the strategies that the student came up with is emotions, logic, and ethics. So looking at the first point, it's talking about emotion being used by the author. And so the first quote is, "Nobody ever helps me to carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And aren't I a woman?" So this kind of line that they're citing from the text, it does draw an emotion because it's showing how the author is being kind of stepped over and treated poorly. So it's drawing not only on her emotions of how she feels in the moment of kind of being looked down upon and treated poorly, while also kind of drawing emotions for the reader on how they should feel in this situation. The next piece of evidence is, "I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off to slavery, and when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me." So this is again drawing on emotion. It's a very emotional kind of depiction of what's going on with her children being sold off to slavery. And it's also very emotional with how she explains how her own mother's grief is kind of heard by nobody but Jesus himself. So this is a very emotional kind of quotation. So it does justify that the author is using emotion to try to explain their argument. The third piece of evidence used by this author, or by this student, to support this claim about emotion being used is, quote unquote, "Obliged to you for hearing me, and now old sojourner ain't got nothing more to say." And so this is kind of drawing on how the author of this text is thankful for anyone to listen to them, and how it's her time has come and she's done. And so this really draws on emotion by showing how the author is kind of a grateful, decent human being, and it kind of makes an emotional attachment for the reader to the author, while also kind of depicting how others poorly treated this author, even though she had this kind of empathetic mindset. Looking at the next point, it's discussing how logic is used as a rhetorical strategy to support the author's argument. And so the first piece of evidence used is more than half of the population of the United States is female, but women occupy only 2% of the managerial positions. So can be seen as logic, since it's simply just stating a fact that is kind of clear and apparent, and they're using this to explain how, or an argument for, I assume, further women's rights. And so it's very just a logical statement, and this quote supports that. So the next piece of evidence we have is no women sit on the AFL-CIO Council or Supreme Court. In Congress, we are down to 1 senator and 10 representatives. So again, this is simply logic-based because it is explaining almost a fact. It's just stating that clearly there aren't enough women represented in Congress or in many other kind of higher societal, or higher political institutions. And so it's supporting her argument for further women's rights just by using logic. For the third piece of evidence, it is a proposal that has been before every Congress for the last 40 years, and that sooner or later must become part of the basic law of the land, is the Equal Rights Amendment. And so again, this quote is simply just more logic, since it's a fact that this amendment has been placed in front of many Congresses and they've all turned it down, and how women's rights should be part of the quote-unquote law of the land. So the third and final point is that Williams uses ethics as a rhetorical strategy to explain her argument. And so looking at the first quote that we have, it is, quote-unquote, goes against the very heart of what you believe is right and fair. So this is drawing on kind of the moral ethics of the situation. So it's kind of talking about how one person's idea of what is right and fair can kind of be overlooked and decided by another. And so it's kind of asking for how the reader would feel in this situation and how their ethics would play out. The next piece of evidence is the winner of the ladies single receives $30,000 less than the men's winner. So this is another kind of ethical point, since it's clear, it's also logical at the same time. It's stating a fact like we looked in the other evidences, but it's also ethical because it's deciding, it's asking both herself and the reader, do they think that this is a fair kind of system to allow this to happen? The third piece of evidence is they are firmly in the inequality for the women camp. And so this is ethics again, since it shows that there's a group that is against women's rights, basically, in tennis, and that it's kind of ethically and morally wrong for them to do such. And this quote is kind of emphasizing that. So overall, this model is well structured and evenly explains each of the 3 points that it has. It's backed all of it up with a decent amount of evidence, and it referenced all the evidence. So this is kind of the perfect model for how you should base any kind of essay or evidence-based claim that you're trying to make. Yeah. All right, guys, so that's what I have for you on organizing your own evidence-based claims. I recommend that next time you make an essay, you try to use this model, and you can list off all the different quotations that you have of the text. And yeah, so I'll attach it down below, and I'll see you in the next video.